The battle for Laikipia tells the story of land in Kenya. There are the Africans who've been on the land forever, for
the
generations.
Indigenous Samburu people, I think, as their
Exactly.
name,
Yeah. So they've been on that land for as long as, time immemorial, right?
Yeah.
You could say it's their land. And then there are white settlers who have come maybe in the last 2 or 3 generations and settled on that land, who also feel as though it's their land.
This confrontation over these different approaches to land is becoming massively heightened and exacerbated by a climate crisis. Yes, pastoralists, nomadic people who've lived there for centuries are wanting to get to water, but in the drought seasons, there aren't as many sources of water, and so they have no choice but to cross into these pieces of land that are now deemed private.
It's almost comical that you as a white person can stand on African land and say that it's yours. You're an immigrant, mate.
A lot of the time people like to talk about colonialism as if it's over. It's not. It's very much, these battles over land and resources are ones I literally watch even today in my family.
As climate change continues to rage on, these discussions around land ownership and resources are going to become increasingly more important and more, as you said, more vexed.
Yeah.
I don't know that we necessarily have the tools and the language to have those conversations in a way that's meaningful and mutually beneficial.
Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Roots and Rigour, Rigour and flow. Rigour and flow.
1. Hello.
Hi, welcome back to season 3.
Yes.
This is Rigour and Flow.
With me, Aiwan.
And me, Tamanda.
And it's the show where business meets love.
And culture meets critique.
Is that the normal way around we do it?
No, but I liked it.
We're doing something new.
Keeping it fresh.
We're keeping it fresh.
Yes.
Exactly.
And on that note, if you haven't already liked, followed, subscribed, please do it now.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing?
And if you are listening on audio, then
leave us a review.
Leave a review, particularly on like Spotify. If you listen on Spotify or on Apple, give us 5 stars. Press the 5-star thing.
As many times as you can. And even better, leave a comment.
Yes, as well. Yeah, you can leave comments on Spotify, so definitely leave a comment. And don't forget, you can actually watch the show on YouTube, so you can actually see the chaos that is Rigour and Flow.
In real time.
In real time.
What have we got today?
Today's a pretty big one. As always, we love to kick off our seasons with big, hefty, meaty topics.
Sure do.
And the topic we've got today is land rights and settler colonialism in Africa.
Yes, ma'am. How did we get here?
Well, for that we have to go way back, all the way back into time. Back into time.
Go, baby, go, baby, go, baby.
Yes. But way back in, I think it was 2019 or 2020. It was during the release of my film, Kenyan Christian Queer, which we've spoken about in episode 1. And I was touring the film, and the film got accepted to Film Africa and was screening at Rich Mix in London. On the same bill was a film by a brilliant director called Pete Murimi. And he was touring his film, I Am Samuel, which is also a film about a gay Kenyan young man.
Oh.
So we were both touring queer Kenyan films at the same time and ended up on the same bill.
I did not appreciate that part of the history of you knowing or coming into contact with Pete.
Fast forward to the summer of 2025.
Yeah.
And I find out that my first feature film, Wax Print, is on the same bill as Pete's second film, Battle for Laikipia, as part of Hyde Picture House's African film screening series. So it just seems like our films are just touring at the same time. We're finding ourselves on the same circuit at the same time. Anyway, he was there for a Q&A, and we sat and we watched the film.
We sure did.
One of the things I want to say that I really loved about the screening, the organizers of the screening gave an announcement straight away, and they said, this is not your typical screening. In this screening, if you want to laugh, you can laugh. If you need to shout, you can shout. If you need to have dialogue with the person next to you, you can. This is a very human screening. It almost reminded me of the screenings in Africa. Like, I remember when I was touring wax print in Africa, the difference with an African audience was stark compared to a British audience.
Yeah.
Because there would be like, almost like
it's
church.
a collective, a call and response,
yeah.
a collective discussion and responding to what's on the screen.
There might be some hissing, there might be some,
kissing your teeth.
There might be, yes, that is correct. It could be anything. And they made sure to set up the space for that to be okay. And then they press play on the film. And
it was. I was with you.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, Hyde Park Picture House when it went down.
Yeah,
and it was intense.
It was really, really intense.
Was it? Did you get audible responses? Do you feel during the film?
Absolutely.
Was it similar actually to like your screenings in Africa?
Absolutely.
Really, not
more
muted?
Very much so. No, I mean obviously it's not as intense as the African screenings, but it was people did share their feelings throughout the film in various ways.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get into it. What was your feeling about the battle for Laikipia? What's it about first? Let's start there.
So the battle for Laikipia, and I think you should definitely jump in case I missed something, but it tells the story of land in Kenya, and there are the Africans who've been on the land forever, for generations.
Indigenous Samburu people, I think, as their
exactly
name,
yeah. So they've been on that land for as long as, time immemorial, right? You could say it's their land.
Yeah.
And then there are white settlers who have come maybe in the last 2 or 3 generations and settled on that land, and who also feel as though it's their land because they've been on it for several generations. They've had kids there, they've buried their parents and grandparents there. They feel as though it's their land as well. Now, the 2 approaches to that land are quite interesting because where the indigenous people, they just move through the land as
they're almost nomadic.
They're almost, they're nomadic, right? So they go where the water is, they go where the animals are, and so on and so forth. And they just move quite fluidly across the land. The settlers have taken a
very European private property rights approach, I would say.
No, I agree. They've taken that kind of approach. And they have built fences. And they have built like quite rigid living structures, so houses, brick houses, unlike say the tents and the huts of the Samburu people, right? Those fences that they've built now prevent the Samburu from getting to the things that they need to get to in order to survive. So it might be better grazing lands for their animals, it might be access to water. And sometimes the things they need to get access to are on the land, the part of the land that the settlers so-called own. Right?
And the other thing to add to this is that this confrontation over these different approaches to land is becoming massively heightened and exacerbated by a climate crisis. Because what you're seeing in this film is, pastoralists, nomadic people who've lived there for centuries are wanting to get to water, but in the drought seasons, there aren't as many sources of water. And so they have no choice in terms of their survival, but to cross into these pieces of land that are now deemed private. So it's also about climate crisis and racial justice in the context of climate crisis as well.
Agreed. It was really quite a confronting film. It really was. There was a scene in the film where things are getting really heated between the 2. And you've got this young white man who has been born and raised on this land. And he is actively going out to ensure that his land is not encroached upon by these native Samburu people. And he puts together what can only be described as a small army of local Kenyans.
Yep.
And you know what it was that really got me? in the putting together of this small army.
Who were presumably paid private security.
Essentially.
Like co-opted local people, essentially.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Mm-hmm. But what really kind of threw me is he's talking to these people like as if they're kids, like they're nothing, like they're little boys, and telling them, who are more closely related to the Indigenous Samburu people, to go out and if you have to kill them, kill them. To go and kill your own people in order to protect the land of this white settler colonialist. And at the same time, I'm going to talk to you like you're a piece of shit, like you're a little boy.
Yep.
And then the scene where the grandfather, I think it was, burned to death in the hut.
Yep.
Because of acts of aggression from the white settlers.
Yeah.
That moment, man, when they're looking at his charred remains and they're just weeping, I don't know, it was a lot.
The whole thing was, it was brutal.
It was very brutal.
Brutal watching, actually.
So you were there.
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction to the film? That's a big sigh. That is a big sigh.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, and I suspect this feeling was quite widely felt by others in the cinema, but I spent most of the screening enraged. You know the kind of rage you feel where your body is shaking? Like
it's visceral.
It's visceral.
Yes.
You almost can't contain it, and you almost want to walk out and get out of the seat, but you can't because the film was so compelling and I wanted to see it all the way through. But I was hearing the kinds of things I've heard in conversation in my own life amongst people I know that these days I just remove myself from a room if those kinds of things get said. And so I think that a lot of the frustration and aggravation I felt watching it was really because the kinds of incidents that you described in the film were just too close for comfort. You know what I mean?
Okay, tell me more.
So I think, so if I was to break down the bits that drove me up the wall, one of them is the thing you were saying about the utterly patronizing stance of these fourth generation settlers towards Indigenous people. And there was a moment, I'm sure, in the film, or probably several moments, where one of them just referred to fully grown men who are older than you as boys.
Yep.
You know, and that stuff grinds my gears in a way I cannot express because I'm going to be honest, I grew up around that. And I spoke about this before on the mixed race episode and what it means to grow up between very, very different sides of the family, like a white side where there's a lot more wealth and they are all descended of settlers or were in some cases the first of the settlers themselves. And then a black side of the family who would be like the native Samburu. One of my really strong memories as a child was going across the border to South Africa to visit white relatives, who, by the way, I loved. And I didn't obviously have a race politics at age 7. And I remember just being so perplexed because I would turn up at family members' houses and people kept going, oh, have you told the boy to move the horses? Have you told the boy to clear the weeds? Have you told the boy to take the garbage out? And I'd be like, which boy were they talking about? Because I'm coming from Botswana, right? So I'm like thinking, is there a small boy? And I'm not thinking of that boy as having a particular race. And then eventually I realize that the boy has a name. And this takes many years of visits to understand that the boy has a name, an English name. I sure as hell know that is not his given African name. So in other words, who named him, only God knows. But he looks like any one of my uncles. He's my elder. He's a big grown man that I have been raised to treat with respect. Yet in this context, in the life of people descended of settlers, he is nothing more than a mere boy who is employed to do, what you call it, not like domestic labor in the house, but like groundsman work or work on the lands, the lands that really belongs to them, depending on where you start your history.
Yeah.
So, you know, that would be just one example of something in the film that just ground my gears. But there were loads. There was the sheer entitlement with which the settler colonialists, you know, spoke about their rights to the lands. There's this one point where this white settler brings in this group of Samburu pastoralists who have been trespassing on his land to get to the water to graze their stock. And he says to them, you come here and you walk on my land, you treat us like we're dogs. And this is my land, not yours. That's what he says. He says it to them with his whole chest. And I'm just like, on what planet and what kind of history and on what kind of storytelling in your community do you have no conception that these people were here before you? That for them, that this is their land, and no idea that you even thinking of this as your land, as something to be privately owned, is a direct contradiction to centuries of ways of living of those people, where if, much like Botswana or other parts of Africa, that land is communally owned. Everybody gets to graze it. Everybody gets to move through it. And everybody moves with the season. If there's a drought, people will move en masse. There's no such thing as I own this. That didn't exist before colonialism. This is a colonial import, the idea that you can even privately own this thing. And there just seemed to be almost no engagement with the idea amongst that community that this is, you have come in and imposed something different.
It was such a, I can't work out if it's like an obliviousness, a willful ignorance. I don't know. I just, it was almost like the things that we seemed to get in that space, that cinema, we all seemed to get it black and white.
Yeah.
And these people, the settlers, didn't seem to get it. What seemed so obvious.
Yeah, and again, when I say this is close to home, you know, I 100% have family members and definitely people I grew up with and in my network who would hold similar attitudes to that, growing up in settler environments in Southern Africa. And I think there's several things. I think some of it goes back to basic whiteness and white privilege. The defense is to not see it. And I do believe that a lot of the time that is willful ignorance. But also many of these people have really been socialized into a white supremacist system. You know, people in South Africa during apartheid who were taught that these people, it's very natural that these Bantu people, these African people should be in a separate kind of education from you. And of course, years later, once apartheid has ended, everybody rewrites history in their head. Oh, I never really believed that. But when it was happening, I do not remember a single person saying otherwise, or you know, people seem to willfully forget that they also called people a boy and not by their name. Yeah. So I don't know what kind of psychology, I'm sure somebody like Kehinde Andrews will say to you it's psychosis of whiteness or something, but there is a mindset that's entrenched, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, you can tell it still riles me up.
No, definitely. And it was a really intense film and people were riled up in the cinema.
Yeah. What were the responses that you recall? Or is there anything even that I've said that felt like you were also experiencing at the same time?
I think I was just in shock. I think partly is that I didn't grow up in a country that was settled. Like even when I think about Nigeria, I didn't grow up there and I wasn't born there. But what I know of Nigeria and having visited Nigeria several times and having parents who are from there and who talk about Nigeria, it's a land that is predominantly Black and it's run by Black people. And there was never any of that settler mentality or settlers there at all. Do you know what I mean? If you saw a white person, it was almost like, it was actually a kind of, almost like an oddity, like a curiosity, like, that there's a white person. Oyinbo, you know? So I don't even have a framework for even understanding that, you know? So even when I hear about like South Africa and white South Africans, and then seeing on screen in Battle for Laikipia, these white settlers literally saying to these people that it's their land, it doesn't even compute. It's like, you're actually crazy.
Right.
This is not your
There
land.
you
Like
go.
it's like it's almost comical that you as a white person can stand on African land and say that it's yours. My brain can't even as I sit here, I'm just like, that's just, you're mad. You're actually mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an immigrant, mate.
Yeah.
That's what you are. I don't care if you've been here 2 or 3 generations. It's a bit like me now in Britain, right? I am whatever you might call it, 2nd generation. So my mum came, she gave birth to me. I was born and raised here. I've got a British passport. I still don't consider myself English. And I consider myself the descendant of an immigrant.
That's so interesting, because I was not going to take it there, but I'm kind of glad you did.
Okay.
Because of course, for them, they are in a black majority space. The difference is there's a lot more political power.
And I think that's the thing that throws me.
Thing,
yeah,
because of legacies of colonialism.
Yeah.
So for example, let's take South Africa and Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So in Zimbabwe, you know, okay, and so it was Rhodesia prior to independence, and then you have Mugabe and so on come in. And at that point, you get a very African government, to the point where white settlers could be expelled, and they no longer held the power that they had up until that point.
Yes.
South Africa too is now an ANC government. It's by and large for African people. It's not as if there's loads of white people in government. So you could say that now in a black majority country, they aren't necessarily holding the power in the same way as they once were. But in terms of economic activity and businesses that were built during the colonial era and resources that were grabbed like land, there's still a level of power, right? So I'm just curious about how you relate to that as someone 2nd generation, their claims or their rights to be there.
Do you know what I've realised? Political power is an interesting thing, because even in that film, there was that one guy, the politician, who they were really keen not to win.
The local, he's a Kenyan guy.
Yes, the local Kenyan guy. And there was...
You mean the one who was really radical and
Yes.
for the liberation of pastoralists?
Yes.
And actually the pushing out or the removal of settlers. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
And they really didn't want him to win.
Yeah.
And they had their own political machinations. Machinations?
Oh, I don't know what I know. I know what you
one of
mean.
the
I
two.
care what you mean. Machinations. Come on.
They had their own ways, their own mechanisms of ensuring that he didn't win. Because you remember there was all that kerfuffle that came up around the time of the election.
Yeah.
And he was like all sorts of things. It's the kind of thing that you almost watch in a cinema, in a film.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a Hollywood film.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like...
But it's classic, right? Because the people who were cooperating with the 4th generation white settlers were the local African people who had been co-opted under colonialism.
Exactly.
And so had secured their own power in government and were not pastoralists. We see the same thing in Botswana.
Yes.
The indigenous people, the San, who were of the Kalahari, are one of the most marginalized groups. Other groups from more dominant tribes are now settled. So if there was any kind of movement amongst them, it would be quashed really quickly, because it now disrupts capitalism, it disrupts politics, it disrupts everything, right?
Yeah, and I found that so interesting that actually they still had their own mechanisms wherein they're using black locals to suppress black uprising.
Like the security guards.
Like the security
the little
guards.
private army.
Right, so then when you're talking about power, they... in terms of colour and ethnicity, they don't look like they have power, but they have power.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they've created their own black political arm that will be the black face of their cause.
Yeah, I mean, and all of that was created historically through colonialism, and it's now sustained. It's not even, because I think the reason I'm saying that is because I think many, if any of the people I know who were descended from white settlers were to hear this, they'd say, we don't control that, because in their heads they don't.
Yeah.
But your previous generations secured that support, and those previous generations embedded a kind of capitalism and a kind of approach to natural resources, including the land, that benefited your people.
That you still hold on to today.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying. So they do have power.
Yeah.
And they own the land.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, in that respect, it's quite different to your position as a 2nd generation child of a migrant in your mother.
Yes, exactly. Because yes, I'm here. in this country and I was born and raised here, but I don't have the power here that they have there.
That's 100% would agree with that.
Did you see what I mean?
Yep. I really wanted us to get there because I think that's what often happens in these debates from past experience is that, you know, people I know or people I went to school with who are descendant of settlers say, yeah, but what about, you know, black people and you guys over in Britain? And it's like, actually, there's a fundamental difference, and that difference is power.
Yes.
You know, and legacies and inheritance of a certain kind of power.
Exactly.
There was another thing that riled me up.
A lot riled you up.
A lot riled me up. It really
literally,
did.
I felt like I could see the steam emanating from your head as the film was going on.
Yeah.
It's like the cartoons.
I mean, that's how it felt. Was it like that? But do you think everyone was having a reaction that strong?
I think the black people were.
So do you think the white people were as well? Or were there more shame or...
It was a mixture. I think... Do you know what it is? I think the only thing I can compare it to is watching Black Panther when that came out. I actually got the chance to do 2 watchings of the film. One was with like a 99% black audience in London.
I know that's London straight away.
It was actually Black Girl Book Club.
Oh, okay.
Black Girls Book Club or something like that. And they did a screening. And then I did one in Leeds, which was probably about 90% white, right? And the difference was so stark. In the all black screening, the energy was palpable. It was like this place was thrumming with energy.
The
and
cinema
power.
was Wakanda.
Wakanda was there. The vibranium was vibraniuming. You know what I mean? Yeah. Every move, people were like, yes!
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was almost like church.
Yeah.
You know, in the heat of the sermon.
I've been
or the
there.
heat of the praise and worship.
Yeah.
You know, people were shouting, cheering, booing the villains, like, you know, when bad things happened, you know, like almost crying and, you know,
lamenting together,
lamenting, weeping, wailing, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like so full of energy.
Yeah.
And then the all white screen was almost like so many of the things that black people could resonate with, like around power and lack of power and triumph in terms of like getting one over on the white people. That, you know, that opening scene where he goes into the museum. Killmonger, I think his name is.
Yeah.
He goes in, so Michael B. Jordan's character, he goes into the British Museum and he sees all of our stuff. And then everyone just like...
stolen bronzes.
All you just hear is a whole sea of kissing of teeth and just like, almost like booing. And then of course he smashes the stuff and takes it and everyone's like, yes! Like,
take it back.
Take it back.
Take it back.
Reparations now. We want reparations now. And then in the white screening, just over everyone's head. It was like tumbleweed. It was literally just like, he smashes the glass like...
I always find this... I always find that so hilarious when you go to theatre and it's made by a black person or when you go to the cinema. Like I remember the same thing happening watching Black Klansman. You could really tell, and those were in mixed audiences, you could always tell where the black people were because you'd hear pockets of sound in response to the right parts or the jokes.
I was the pocket in that screening. I had to add my little voice. Pocket. I was like, reparations now.
Were you timid in the corner?
No, I actually wasn't. I wasn't. You know me. I have no
you were
problem.
Just like on your own, Malcolm X.
Literally Malcolm X. Power to the people.
You were Killmonger
I was
Killmonger,
in that moment. I was Black Panther. I was all of them. I was the Dora Milaje. I was everything.
And of course, you're Letitia Wright anyway.
Of course. Jesus, that's a story for another day. But I think in that screening, it was kind of like that. It was like there was the black people with their shouts and their sort of... you know, jubilations, exclamations, all of that. And then with the white people, it almost felt like when I looked around, I felt like a sense of maybe guilt or like really trying to process. I can't really explain fully, but it was like I don't know if I should say anything.
Am I allowed to say something? Am I allowed to have a reaction? Am I allowed to be angry about this?
Yeah. Or am I allowed to find empathy for the settlers? Because at the end of the day, they are people that look like me and I have a lot of affinity with.
Yeah.
But you could feel that reservation, that almost reticence. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is my place to say anything or display any feelings one way or the other, despite what the woman had said at the start of the screening, which is, this is a place for you to express the fullness of whatever it is you feel, regardless of your ethnicity.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I felt. And so there felt like a little bit of a tension in the cinema.
I was going to say, I
if I'm
describe it
honest.
as a bind. But
Yes.
I was really quite surprised by how vocal some of the white people in that cinema screening were.
Oh, no, there were
because
some.
unlike...
I found it was the more younger students.
Yes, I suspect they're heavily involved in activism.
Exactly.
And so I guess one of the reticence people would have about shouting is that they might seem performative.
True.
You know, but then there was a young crop who didn't necessarily feel like that. And yeah, it was very interesting because unlike in other, like let's say you go to your average Black Panther screening.
Yes.
This was specifically put on as an African featured film festival.
Yes.
And it was also promoted by the Racial Justice Network
Yes.
in Leeds. So I think it probably did draw a very conscious group of white people who've done a lot of thinking in this area. And therefore, I see what you're saying about the reticence, and it was definitely there, but they were more vocal than I would say your average Odeon cinema screening of a Black film.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that, I find interesting, you mentioned whether there'd be an affinity and a conflict for some of those white people. And in a way, that's one half of my lineage. Mm-hmm. So what always surprises me, and what surprised me with the Battle for Laikipia, is there was this moment in the film where I had this sense the directors and the filmmakers had wanted us to feel this degree of empathy for a white woman who was like quite heavily censored in the film.
Yeah. And she eventually passed away from cancer, if I'm not mistaken.
Which was sad.
It was really sad.
And you could tell the directors were really invested in her and had clearly become close to her.
Yes.
And the overwhelming sense I had was that we were supposed to feel this deep empathy for her. Yeah. And I'm going to be completely honest. And I find this, I don't know how I feel about this in myself, but I could not connect with my empathy for her.
Interesting.
And I don't know what that says about me. I respected that she was trying to grapple with something that many other white settlers in the film just weren't even entertaining. She really was trying. I think she had a good heart and she was trying to understand the experience of the local people, but I still found her so willfully ignorant.
Yeah, do you know what it is? She was trying to do those things, but she was also trying to be a mother. What's happening there is that she knows that she's coming to the end of her life.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I imagine that as you come to the end of your life, one of your sole concerns is, what am I leaving to my children?
Yeah.
What battles are they going to have to fight? Have I secured enough security and stability and resource for them to be able to live a life that's relatively free from struggle? And I imagine that she was grappling with both because she knows the situation of the other mothers on the other side. And she knows what they're going through. Yep. But she also wants her own children to be well as well. And she knows the situation that they're in is very, very tenuous. And she also knows, as we then found out, that she has cancer and she's dying. And she's like, have I done enough? Is this even the right thing? Should I have taken my kids back to, were they British originally? A few generations back?
Yeah, because they were off in British boarding schools.
Exactly.
The kids, one of them was away at school and she's on the phone to that child.
Exactly.
Who's clearly in a private school.
Exactly.
In boarding.
So she's probably grappling with, did I make the right choice? Should I have actually just gone back when I first saw the first signs of this? Because climate change is real. So one of the things she talks about is the fact that resources are scarce for everybody. They're all struggling for the same limited resource, natural resource. And she's like, did I make the right choice? Should I have just left when I had the youth and the energy to do so and just rebuild in the UK where I know for a fact I would have been okay? But I'm coming to the end of my life now and maybe it's too late for me to make that choice. So when I saw her, I kind of felt, I don't know, I could see the struggle, I could really see the struggle for her.
Yeah, you know what?
But she said some dumb shit.
She did. And you know what? But can I just say, though, this is why I love being married to you, because you always bring me a perspective. And it's because you make films, and it's this thing, the same way you talk about the Tommy Robinson stuff, like, and how, you know, in episode 3, you spoke about how you want to understand how he thinks. Yeah. That capability you have to find, like, where is she coming from? What is she struggling with? I hadn't even connected all those dots, which I kind of feel ashamed about on one level.
I don't think you should, because the thing with you and me is that I am not as connected on a familial level at all. I just don't I connect in the sense that I'm Black, I'm proud, and I want Black people to own their own land in Africa, definitely. But I don't have that deep connection that you do in terms of your family in South Africa and in Botswana. I don't have that connection.
But surely that should make me have more affinity.
No, because if I think back to all the episodes of this show where we've spoken about it, you've experienced some very raw violences from the white side of your family, both in Northern Ireland and in South Africa.
Yeah, and also some great experiences. They're not all bad.
True.
So, you know, you should then be able to reconcile that to some extent. And it's not that I can't. I intellectually follow your line of thinking. And actually, even you delving into this thing of she's thinking about, should I have left? Should I have done this? What's my future generation? And she also knows thinking about that is hopeless, because if you remember, her son, the one who tells the Samburu that you treat us like dogs and you're stealing from us on our land, he actually speaks the local language.
He does, fluently.
So he is clearly even more settled than her.
He's more entrenched.
And more than likely went to school with local Black people, but probably the children of those politicians who don't want those pastoralists to win.
Exactly.
Right? So a co-opted Black leadership.
Yes.
I imagine he went to school with people like that.
Yeah.
A bit like I did, you know?
Yeah.
And she probably knows the idea that she could have gone back, or that her future generation could go back, is quite futile, or a lot more difficult than it would have been for her.
Yeah, but remember, she's probably not thinking straight.
That's true.
That's the thing. In that moment, it's just your raw emotion, your motherly instinct to protect. And it's just like, I want to take them back. That child of hers isn't going back anywhere.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm either going to get my land or I'm going to die getting my land.
Yeah.
This guy's weaponry, he had all sorts of machine guns and machetes, all sorts of stuff. He was like stocked to the hilt.
Yeah. And that is why I couldn't access the empathy. And you're reminding me now, because
there is
him. But he is her offspring.
That's true.
And therefore a reflection of her or their lineage.
That's true.
Because at one point he turns around and says, I'm going to napalm them all.
Yes.
And that was absolutely incomprehensible to me. And while I get that many people descended of that group don't think like that, there is a general attitude of, I will do whatever I will to protect my land and to protect my stuff, but also completely absent of any understanding of history where other people have legitimate claims to that land. And I find that inexcusable.
Yeah, or even humanity. He doesn't see those local people as human beings on the same level as him.
Yeah.
He doesn't see their humanity the way he sees his own.
Yeah.
Even the people who he's going to probably send out to do the napalming, he doesn't see as humans.
Exactly.
They can die there killing their own people for all he cares, as long as it secures his resources.
Exactly. And actually, you're reminding me, that is where I also had short shrift with his mother's lament, because she sort of may have made this statement, as you say, I don't remember it, her saying that everybody's struggling for resources under climate change. And with the best will in the world, I looked at their ranch. I looked at the aerial shots of the size of their land. I looked at how much water they had. I looked at their houses. At one point, they get broken into and their house is ransacked. They don't want for anything.
No,
they don't want for anything. So it's nonsense. It's a bad faith argument.
That was one of the stark scenes for me, because I think previously we had seen the tent or hut where the grandpa had
of the Samburu native people.
Yeah, and in the rubble, it was literally just rubble. Like maybe there was the odd torn up t-shirt and maybe like a shoe or something, and that was about it. Then you cut to their house that's been ransacked and destroyed, and it's full of stuff. Like there's CDs, there's sofas, there's chairs, there's radios, there's TVs, there's
and also
all sorts of things.
Can we stop saying burnt to death? He was murdered.
No, he was murdered.
Yeah, and like you say, there was no loss of life at all on the white settler side. The only lives that were not by murder. There was death by disease.
Yeah, okay.
There was nothing in relation to the political conflict.
Maybe they talked about the wider, that a few white people had been killed,
about one
but not in
two
terms
people.
of that actual community that we're focused on.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to fact check that bit. But in any case, it was like you could see so plainly the differentials of power and resource.
Absolutely.
Even if in this same struggle over resource or threats from the outside, they clearly were massive imbalances of power in that.
Huge. I'm seeing ceramic china mugs.
Oh.
I'm seeing also silver forks and knife and spoon.
We don't need knives, forks and spoons. What do you mean?
We use our hands. Oh, Lord. You've touched on the fact that your life is kind of quite intimately intertwined with settler descendants of settlers who are themselves settlers in Black majority lands. I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper because your response was so strong.
Yeah.
Like, even when I came out the cinema, I was like, yeah, I'm angry too, but this is a bit of a different level of anger, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess I want to dig a bit more into that to really find out where that was coming from. Like, what have been your, I guess, more tangible experiences of this settler situation?
I think I've spoken quite a bit about my childhood and the legacies of like my family on both sides. But you know, I think a lot of the time people like to talk about colonialism as if it's over. It's not. It's very much present. These battles over land and resources are ones I literally watch even today in my family. To give an example of this, my father, I think calling him a settler might feel strong because he went to Africa as a teacher rather than with a whole family and with a whole thing to settle and take any land. He didn't necessarily take any land, but he still came under like a British government's policy that teachers from UK should go to Africa to civilize the natives before independence, right? In that colonial era. So he's part of that whole dynamic. And of course, he meets my mum, who is a student, in Africa at the time, and they end up getting married. They are actually in love, but there is all this kind of very colonial configuration. Fast forward to today, both of them live in Botswana on a piece of tribal land where in Botswana, those property rights don't function according to those colonial logics once you get out of the big cities.
Okay.
Right? So in Botswana, if you're in Botswana, you have a right to what's called tribal land just by descent, meaning you can go to your local chief. Each village has its chief, and you can request that you are assigned land to graze, to cultivate, to do whatever. Now, Botswana is a very hard place to graze and cultivate because it's a desert, essentially. But in any case, my parents have a piece of land that my mum got from the local chief for her PhD. About a few months ago, my parents called me in a complete frenzy because they had woken up to find that there were footprints coming up to their house on the land, and loads of oranges from their orchard had been stolen. And also their guinea fowls, these birds that they keep, had also been stolen. And they're panicking because they're like, a bit like these white settlers. If people are going to keep coming, and if people are coming closer and closer to the house, what's next? Are we at risk? Are we going to be, done? And I think for me, the whole way that whole situation got navigated, it was such a colonial thing. Like, their response to it was both like, it felt weird to me. Here's a local woman. I know if people are stealing oranges and guinea fowl, as in food, think about why. There has to be something about food insecurity. Botswana is a place where the unemployment rates are high. The government have just abolished the one small piece of employment support that you could get hold of, which was 1 month's relief if you were out of employment. And people are struggling to feed themselves. And so the difficult thing for my parents and for me watching them was then, how do you handle that situation? You know you have more resources. My feeling, and it's all hypothetical and well and good, is like, if people are stealing that stuff, maybe don't make such a big deal of it because you have more than you know what to do with. I do get that the guinea fowl is their main source of livelihood, but they have more oranges than they know what to do with. And probably it's kids. Do you know what I mean? They would, obviously, other people would think that's not right. That's a soft touch. But I'm thinking about what causes that. They feel obviously differently. They feel threatened. And so they did two things. One was they called the local police to do an investigation. And then because that police investigation wasn't happening, my mum defaulted to all the pre-colonial stuff and called a family relative who's a traditional healer who came to the house to perform this ritual. And in this ritual, they called on the ancestors to, tell them and reveal who had stolen the oranges. Nothing had happened with the police. Nothing had happened. And she said to my mum, that family member left the farm and said to my mum, they will reveal themselves within 2 days. And sure enough, nothing had happened from the police. And within 2 days, the person came forward to say they were part of it. And then the police, after that person came forward, managed to trace the footsteps and the orange peel back to this abandoned house where all these kids had been congregating with their stolen oranges and eating it. And they'd just left the orange peel there, so it was very obvious. And then, of course, there was a whole gathering in the village at the chief, at the kotla, and then they decided how were they going to... The kotla's the tribal meeting place where decisions are made. Mm-hmm. They decided alongside the police what was going to happen.
And what did they decide should happen?
And again, this I really struggle with is I think there was some decision that those kids would be flogged. Mm. Now, for me, this is the conflict, right? Let's think about this.
Yeah.
This policing system is kind of a colonial import. Mm-hmm. You've got a white man and a black woman living on what was tribal land with more resources.
Really nice house.
In a community where everything would have been pretty even and shared before. Now, to me...
In a culture that really values... everything being equal.
Like everything, yeah. The concept of Boto is the concept of that everyone. It's a bit like Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Everyone is like a collective.
Nobody stands out above anyone else.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so now these logics have disrupted capital. My mum being someone who earned and benefited from this system and is now more wealthy, even though she believes she doesn't have resources like the white woman in the film. Mm. She is set apart from these people who don't have much. Now, in my head, I'm thinking they feel under threat. They feel like people are going to come for them. And I'm like, you guys are getting older. You're vulnerable. And now, in dealing with this issue, young children are being flogged.
And they're going to
turn into
adults. What are the
repercussions of that?
Yeah.
Because you're going to continue getting older and older.
And they're going to get into their prime.
Right. So on one level, some of why I think the baggage of the film stayed is because these things are still there. My mum may be a black woman, but she's like some of those co-opted people to some extent.
And it's almost like she hasn't built alliances. So not only is she...
She has, but some of them are also older and now dying.
Okay.
Her alliances from there were, she did her PhD study there.
Okay.
And she employed lots of people at the time because she herself had the resource to do that. Now her resources are dwindling. She can't provide employment. So they're no longer really an employer to local people. They're not really offering anything except a fence over which resources sit.
But normally, even outside of being an employer, as a Botswana,
yeah,
she would have had alliances along cultural lines.
It's a different tribe to her tribe. She came and asked for land in a place that is entirely different from her tribal land. So she's actually an outsider. In fact, my mum is mixed tribe too. So there's another dynamic there. Okay. But she's from neither of her mixes are in that tribe.
Okay.
You're raising a really good point. But I also think some of it is the colonial logics. Some of us have imbibed this private property way of thinking. Mm-hmm. So in another situation, somebody who owned the land would have still went out and made more alliances.
Yeah.
Or
so why do you think she didn't? Is it because of being married to your father, who's a white British man, and maybe she's imbibed some of his values and ways of thinking?
I wouldn't want to put that all on him, but I think
Okay.
these are wider structures. Society has changed as a result of colonialism. Where before everybody worked the land, this isn't just unique to someone like my mother, where before everyone worked the land, people now work in urban centres. They have been forced into a kind of modernity and capitalism where you have a job. Those structures, social structures and hierarchies and relationships have broken down. She wouldn't have had the time to build those alliances because she was out working in the city while my dad stayed home on the farm after he retired, looking after it. And she was the breadwinner because that is how society has changed. So that then leaves you quite vulnerable because none of the alliances that would keep you safe and intact exist in quite the same way.
Right.
Now, I know this seems far from the battle for Laikipia, but in so many ways, that too, like those white settlers I talked about, is an extension. My mum's proximity to a white man shapes how she'll be seen by outsiders.
True.
And whether she'll be a target. Her proximity to him shapes the career path she went on and how she's related and the amount of resources she has. And I'm part of that as well. Of course, I have that proximity to all of those things. So it really hits close to home when I think then, you know, I feel associated with the fact that police are called and kids are going to be flogged. And I think, well, I'm earning all this money over in the West. Like, I can recompense those oranges. There are ways we can get that back that make you less vulnerable. But of course, they're probably thinking, well, if we don't send a message that will take a strong response, this will keep happening and people will get bolder and bolder. I'm just not sure that calculation is accurate.
Have they since had any more thefts on the farm? They have.
Just a couple of weeks ago, people stole copper from the electricity lines that power their house. And that is because copper is sold on the black market over there by people who are struggling. It's crimes of survival.
Crimes of survival. It reminds me of Yellowstone. We spoke about the series, the Paramount series, Yellowstone, in one of our episodes. And again, this battle for land and understanding where ownership begins and where it ends. So in the series Yellowstone, we have a white ranch owner, and that land has been in his family, and it's a lot of land. It's like thousands of acres, but it's been in his family for several generations. And of course, when you go back, so this land is in Montana in North America, and when you go back a few generations, obviously his family got the land. I don't even want to say stole the land from Native Americans who were on that land, a bit like the people of the Samburu, the Samburu people in Battle for Laikipia. They've been there for eons, right? But now the capitalists are coming for the rancher's land, right? And they want to turn his land into a city, essentially, right? A ski resort. And then obviously he's saying to them, it's my land and it's been in my family for several generations, right? Yeah. And they're saying, well, it doesn't matter. This land needs to be developed in order to move things forward. Progress. Things have to move forward. Modernity. Do you know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera. These ways are dying out, et cetera. And of course, the native Indians are saying, well, this was our land before you. Yeah. And actually what's happening to you is what happened to us. And so you are the Indian now. Right? Yeah. And it kind of brought up this question of where does ownership start and where does it actually end?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic the question of storytelling. You know, one community starts their story at X point in history. Another community starts it at X point. And then the capitalist comes on and starts it at another point.
In 2025.
Right. Like, I want to make a casino here. Is that not what they're trying to build there or something?
It's a ski resort that's going to have... Well, the casino thing is more like trying to placate the head of the Native Indians because obviously they're allowed to own casinos and they're run by Native Indians. So they're almost like, we'll give you a casino.
Oh, gosh. That's the carrot.
That's the carrot, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating question. And even going back to the land issues I was talking about in Southern Africa, you see these kinds of debates about where the story starts and who has rights to land and who has rights to receive reparations for land lost. Raging, just earlier this year, April 2025, white Zimbabwean settlers and farmers who had been pushed out of the land by local people had been compensated for the loss of that land.
Who by?
By the Zimbabwean government.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they agitated for reparations.
I don't know the exact features, but I'm going to link to the article because I read it a little while ago. But I know that they were compensated, and there's always, the fact that certain people are successful in even making those agitations and getting compensation is interesting. Like, for example, slavery is a good example of it, right? We've seen white slave owners compensated for owning people as resources.
Yeah,
right?
and actually the last payments to former slave owners was made by the UK government in 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
2015 was the last payment.
And yet, and this is where the storytelling and who has the power to tell their story in a way that gets heard is important, yet not a single person of African descent has ever been compensated for the crime of slavery.
Yep.
Not a single African landowner, and I presume not the native Indians that appear in Yellowstone, were ever compensated for their loss of land.
No, they weren't. Although some would say that they were allowed to have casinos, whether that's a worthy compensation.
Allowed to have casinos. Do you know what I mean?
And could keep the profits. And it's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
But
because
it's certainly not the payments. I mean, we're talking millions of pounds that were given to these former slave owners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yet similar claims and storytelling by historically colonized or enslaved groups almost draw eye rolls. If you look at where the reparations
and almost
debate
like
is.
A resistance of one of the arguments I hear is, well, everybody has owned slaves at various points in history. It's just a plague of the human condition. So just get over it. And it's like, well, no, because if you can compensate the slave owners, then you can compensate the enslaved or the descendants of the enslaved. Because I know for a fact the last payment in 2015 was not to the actual slave owner, it was to their family.
Exactly.
So that means
now the generations.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So now they're benefiting from what their parents did.
Yeah.
So why can I not be compensated for what happened to my parents? Sorry, my great
my descendants.
My ancestors.
Ancestors, sorry, not descendants.
Yeah, for my ancestors.
Yeah.
To benefit my descendants.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting situation, and it is really complex and really complicated, and I don't know that there is a clearly defined end to any of it, but what I do know is that I'm glad that we are having these discussions, because I feel like as climate change continues to rage on, I think these discussions around land ownership and resources are going to become increasingly more important and more, as you said, more vexed.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we necessarily have the tools and the language to have those conversations in a way that's meaningful and mutually beneficial. And so I don't have any answers, but I am glad that we're having these conversations now, and that maybe they are a stone in the wall, I don't know, that's built in these discussions.
Ditto. And I really do think the film Battle for Laikipia is, a great place to start to engage in that debate, whatever you feel.
Because that's Kenya. This is going to be happening all over the world, particularly in those places that then become more habitable because of climate change. There are parts of the world that are like really, really cold right now, but as climate change evolves, they're actually going to become very nice places. And then people are going to flock there. And then we're going to have the same discussions again. Who has the right to own the land? Where do you even start calculating?
That's if we're not extinct yet.
But that's if we're not extinct.
I mean, somebody's definitely going to challenge me who has a different worldview and say we will have all been saved.
But that's why we want to have this discussion. I love it. I want to hear what people's thoughts are.
Okay. Oh, my family are going to kill me. They're going to hate me, but it's true. That's how I feel.
I don't think they're going to hate you. I think it's important to have these discussions. I think you can't, I don't know,
how can you not?
Conversation is important,
Yeah.
And I think hearing all sides of a particular argument, I think is important.
Yeah, agreed.
Because otherwise then we're in that world where it's like, well, only their view matters.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's not the world that I live in.
That's true.
Well, that's the end of our first episode of season 3. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. It is a very complicated and complex topic, and we don't say that we have all the answers.
Nope.
But what we are doing is at least starting that conversation between ourselves, and we really hope that you'll be a part of that conversation. So definitely leave a comment with your thoughts on today's episode. And as always, please share, like, and leave a review because it really does help us to be found and to grow our audience.